The woman on Highway 47. It happened on a rainy night in late October, somewhere along Highway 47 in northern Montana, a long, empty stretch of road surrounded by endless pine forests and patches of fog that seemed to hang like ghosts over the asphalt. My name's Jack Holden. I've been driving trucks for over 18 years, but that night still sticks with me like oil on skin. The kind of memory that won't wash off, no matter how many miles you drive away from it. The weather had turned bad fast. Wind gusts hit the trailer from the side, the wipers barely keeping up with the downpour, and the CB radio was dead quiet, not a single voice, not even static. Around midnight, I passed the last lit gas station for nearly 70 miles, then nothing but black woods and my own headlights cutting through the rain. The road felt too empty, like everyone else had decided not to risk it. About 10 miles later, I saw her. A figure on the shoulder, illuminated in my high beams. She was standing perfectly still, drenched from head to toe, wearing a long gray coat that looked more like an old-fashioned dress. She had a suitcase, small, leather, probably decades old. She didn't wave, didn't move. Just stared ahead, not even turning toward the truck. At first, I passed her by. Something about it felt wrong. But about half a mile down, guilt started to eat at me. It was freezing out there, and if she'd been stranded, she could die from exposure before morning. Against my better judgment, I slowed, turned around, and pulled onto the shoulder where I'd seen her. My headlights fell on the same spot. She was still there, in the same position, like she hadn't moved an inch. I rolled down my window, leaned out, and shouted through the rain, "You need a ride?" For a few seconds, she didn't answer. Then, without looking up, she nodded once, slow, almost mechanical. I unlocked the passenger door, and she climbed in silently. Her clothes were soaked, but she didn't seem cold. Just distant. Her hands were pale, her fingers thin, and her suitcase sat on her lap like she was guarding it. "You headed somewhere in particular?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, softly, "Just down the road." Her voice was calm, but hollow, like she was reciting something from memory. I shrugged, turned the heat up, and got back on the road. The sound of rain on the windshield filled the silence. For a long stretch, neither of us spoke. I couldn't shake the strange feeling creeping over me. The cab smelled faintly of old perfume, lavender, maybe, but it was mixed with something metallic, something that made the air taste like rust. After a while, I tried again. "You from around here?" She looked out the window and said, "I used to be." That answer didn't help much. I glanced over, her face was turned toward the dark, but from the side I could see she was young, maybe late 20s. Her eyes caught the glow of the dashboard for a moment, and I swear they looked gray, almost clouded. When I asked where exactly she wanted to go, she said, "There's a motel just past the river." I knew the spot she meant, a small place near an old bridge that hadn't been in use for years. But as far as I remembered, that motel had been shut down long ago. Still, I figured maybe someone had reopened it. We drove for another 10 minutes. The rain thickened, visibility dropping to almost nothing. My headlights flashed across the sign, "Riverside Motel, Vacancy." The letters were faded, one flickering bulb barely lighting the entrance. I pulled into the lot. It was empty except for a single old pickup, rusted and half buried in weeds. She turned to me and said, "Thank you for stopping." Her tone was polite, but flat, no warmth, no emotion. She reached for the handle, then paused. "You shouldn't stay long." Before I could respond, she opened the door and stepped out into the rain, suitcase in hand. She walked toward the motel, her figure blurring through the downpour. I waited for her to go inside, but she never did. She just disappeared behind the curtain of rain. After a minute, I switched off the engine and got out. The rain hit me like nails, cold and sharp. I walked toward the entrance, calling out, "Hey! You sure you're okay?" No answer. The only sound was water dripping from the roof and the distant hum of my truck's engine. I reached the door she'd gone toward. It was half open, creaking softly. I pushed it wider and looked in. The lobby was empty. Dust on the counter. Old brochures from the 1990s. The place smelled of mold and rot. There was no fresh footprint, no sign anyone had been there in years. I turned around to head back, and that's when I saw it. Her suitcase was sitting on my passenger seat. I hadn't noticed her leave it. It was soaked, but the leather was strangely intact. I carried it inside the truck and placed it on the floor, trying to decide what to do. Maybe she'd come back for it. Maybe she was hiding somewhere. Curiosity got the better of me. I unlatched the clasps and lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in yellowed fabric, was an old black and white photograph. I wiped off the condensation and froze. The picture showed 3 men standing next to a truck, my truck. Same company logo, same number on the door. But this photo was old, probably taken 40 years ago. One of the men was my father. He died when I was a kid, long before I started driving. In the corner of the photo, standing just behind them, was a woman. The same gray coat. The same suitcase. The same expression. I dropped the photo and slammed the lid shut. My hands were shaking. I tossed the suitcase onto the passenger seat and started the engine, ready to get as far from that place as possible. The CB radio suddenly crackled to life, even though it had been dead all night. A soft voice came through, her voice. "Thank you for the ride, Jack." I nearly drove off the road. "Who is this?" I shouted. "How do you know my name?" Static. Then, faintly, the same voice again. "Your father stopped for me once, too." The radio went silent. My heart was hammering. I drove until dawn without stopping, refusing to look at the passenger seat. When the sun finally rose, I pulled into a diner parking lot, exhausted. I turned to grab the suitcase, but it was gone. Completely gone. The seat was dry, no sign it had ever been there. I went inside, pale as a ghost. The waitress asked if I was okay. I told her I'd picked up a woman near the old Riverside motel. Her face drained of color. "Sir, that motel burned down 12 years ago," she said quietly. "A woman died there. They say she still waits by the road during storms." I left the diner without finishing my coffee. When I got back to my truck, something was on the seat, the photograph, folded neatly, dry as paper. This time, there was handwriting on the back in faded ink, "See you down the road." Later, I checked the dash cam footage. It showed me pulling over, opening the passenger door, waiting, but no one ever got in. The entire ride, the passenger seat was empty. And yet, the suitcase, the smell, the voice, they all happened. I can still hear that voice when I'm driving alone at night, whispering through the static of my CB radio. Now, whenever I see someone standing on the side of Highway 47 in the rain, I keep driving. I don't look twice. Because I know some passengers never really leave the road. The end. Rest stop number 19. It happened in February of 2016, somewhere along Interstate 70, between Denver and the Kansas border. That part of the road is long, flat, and lonely, a straight gray scar through the plains where the wind never stops and the night feels wider than anywhere else in America. My name's Daniel Reeves. I've been hauling freight for nearly 15 years, but nothing I've seen before or since compares to what happened that night at rest stop number 19. It was around 1:40 in the morning. Snow had been falling since dusk, thick and dry, covering the asphalt in a thin white layer. My windshield wipers moved in a tired rhythm, squeaking every few seconds. The heater hummed softly, and the radio played nothing but static. There hadn't been another set of headlights in over an hour. I was running low on caffeine, my eyes burning, when I saw the blue sign, "Rest Area, 2 miles." I'd stopped at that rest area once years earlier, back when it was newer, cleaner. Now it looked almost forgotten, just 2 old lampposts flickering in the wind, a brick restroom building, and a handful of parking spaces for trucks. The snow made everything silent, muffled. I pulled into a spot near the edge of the lot, killed the engine, and let the silence swallow me. The first strange thing I noticed was the other trucks. There were 3 of them, parked side by side near the center. All dark, no running lights, no movement inside. Thick snow had piled on their roofs, maybe 2 inches, untouched. Nobody had gotten out for hours. I left my headlights on for a minute, just watching the flakes swirl through the beams. The rest stop sign creaked softly in the wind. There was no sound except the hiss of snow against metal. I told myself I'd take a quick nap, maybe 30 minutes. But before I could recline the seat, there came a knock. 3 sharp taps on my driver's side door. I froze. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't ice falling. It was a deliberate knock, slow, steady, and close. I looked out through the window, but the snow made visibility near zero. My side mirror was a blur of white. I leaned closer, squinting. Nothing. No shadow, no movement. "Who's there?" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the snow. No answer. I turned on the cab light. The yellow glow filled the interior, and I checked the mirrors again. Still nothing. I started to think maybe I'd imagined it, maybe it was the sound of expanding metal, or something falling off the roof. I was exhausted. I turned the light off and reclined the seat again. Then came the second knock. This time, it was on the passenger door. 2 slow, deliberate taps, and 1 heavier, like a palm pressing against the glass. I sat up fast, grabbed my flashlight, and pointed it toward the window. Snowflakes illuminated by the beam drifted down slowly, but there was no one outside. I leaned over and tried to peer through the glass, wiping away the condensation with my sleeve. The flashlight reflected off the snowbank, and for a split second, I thought I saw movement, a dark figure slipping behind the trailer. My pulse was hammering. I threw on my jacket, grabbed the handle, and opened the door just a few inches. Cold air hit me like a knife. The night was dead silent. The snow muffled everything. I stepped down carefully, boots crunching in the thin layer of powder, and swung the beam around the lot. Nothing. Just my own tire tracks, fresh and alone. The other trucks still sat there, dark and lifeless, their windshields coated in frost. I walked past them, my breath turning to mist. Each cab window was fogged, impossible to see through. I tapped one with my knuckles, solid, no sound inside. "Anybody here?" I called out. No response. Not even an echo. When I reached the restroom building, I saw that the door was chained shut. A faded notice was taped to the wall, closed for maintenance, January 2014. It hadn't been opened in years. Snow had sealed the corners. That's when I heard the whisper. It came from behind me, soft, almost too quiet to register, but clear enough that I knew it wasn't the wind. A single word. My name. Daniel. I spun around so fast I nearly slipped. The beam of my flashlight cut through the snow, shaking in my hand. No one. The 3 trucks stood exactly as before, silent and heavy. My own rig was idling in the corner of the lot, faint exhaust drifting into the air. Then, from somewhere near the back of my trailer, came another sound, not a whisper this time, but a slow scraping. Like fingernails dragging across metal. I ran toward the sound, boots slipping, my flashlight trembling. The noise stopped as soon as I rounded the corner. The snow was undisturbed. My heart was racing so hard I could hear it in my ears. That was enough for me. I climbed back into the cab, locked both doors, and turned on every light I had. For a few minutes, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm down. The CB radio crackled suddenly, making me jump. I hadn't touched it in hours. "Anyone out there on 70, a voice said, broken by static. "Yeah," I answered quickly, "this is truck 94. I'm at rest stop 19. You seeing this snow?" Long pause. Then, faintly, "Get off that lot. Now." Before I could reply, the radio went silent. No static. No channel number. Just dead air. That was the final push I needed. I put the truck in gear, eased onto the main road, and started driving. The rearview mirror showed nothing but white, the rest stopped fading behind me. My pulse slowly settled. About 10 miles later, I passed another rest area, this one newer, well-lit, with a couple of cars and a working restroom. I pulled in to catch my breath. Inside the diner, a young guy behind the counter asked where I'd come from. When I said rest stop number 19, his face changed. "That place," he said quietly. "They closed that stop years ago. After the incident." "What incident?" I asked. He hesitated. "A driver was found there in 2014. Locked in his cab. They said he froze to death. The strange part is, his truck was still running, heater on full blast. Cops said it looked like he was trying to get away from something inside the cab." I laughed nervously, pretending not to believe it. But when I got back to my truck, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. On the passenger window, faint, almost erased by melting frost, were 3 fingerprints. Not mine. Small. Like someone had been pressing their hand against the glass from outside. I wiped them off, started the engine, and didn't stop until sunrise. By then, I'd convinced myself it was all exhaustion and nerves. Just another lonely night on the road. A week later, I was going through my dash cam footage. I wanted to check the timestamps, just to see if I'd actually gotten out at the rest area. The footage was dark but clear enough to make out the outline of the lot, the old restroom, and the 3 silent trucks. When the knocking happened, I expected to see nothing. But there was movement. Someone, or something, was standing next to my truck, leaning close to the driver's window. It looked like a person, but too still, too long. The figure stood there for nearly 30 seconds without moving, face pressed close to the glass. The angle caught part of it in the reflection of the mirror, pale, eyes wide open, mouth frozen in a half-smile. Then, just before I opened the door, it turned and walked away, right through one of the parked trucks, disappearing into the snow. I deleted the footage. I didn't want to see it again. But even now, when I pass that stretch of I-70, my radio goes dead for a few seconds. Always in the same place. And sometimes, if the night is quiet enough, I swear I hear it again. 3 slow knocks. The end. Voices on the CB radio. It happened in the late summer of 2018, somewhere along US Route 93, a long, desolate stretch of desert highway between Kingman, Arizona, and Ely, Nevada. My name's Ray Collins, and I've been a long-haul driver for 22 years. That route is my least favorite, not because of the heat or the emptiness, but because every mile of it feels like time doesn't move the same way out there. It's a place where the world forgets you exist. That night I was hauling refrigeration units to a warehouse near Reno. The sun had dropped below the red cliffs hours ago, leaving behind a smear of orange light and an ocean of darkness. The CB radio was my only company, just the occasional chatter between drivers, bursts of static, and weather reports. I remember clearly that the clock on my dash read 11:47 p.m. when it started. A voice came through the CB, faint, almost drowned by static, but human. "Breaker 19, anyone out there? Need some help, please." The tone wasn't casual trucker talk. It was tight, strained, the kind of voice you hear when someone's trying not to panic. "This is truck 211, I said, pressing the mic. "Where you at, driver?" A pause, then the voice again. I think I'm near mile marker 83. Something's wrong with my rig, can't get her to start." I glanced at my GPS. I was near marker 74. Maybe 10 miles south of him. "Hang tight," I said. "I'm close. I'll stop when I see you." "Appreciate it," he said, voice trembling slightly. "Name's Luke. Been out here too long tonight." Then the line went dead, just the hiss of the desert static. 10 miles isn't much, but on that road, it feels like forever. The night was pitch black, no moon, no stars, only the glow of my headlights slicing through sand and scrub. As I drove, I kept glancing at the shoulder, looking for a stalled truck, hazard lights, anything. But there was nothing. Just silence in the endless two-lane strip. When I reached mile marker 83, the only thing there was a narrow dirt pull-off. I slowed down, scanning both sides. No lights, no engine, no sign of anyone. "Luke, you still there?" I said into the mic. "I'm at 83. Don't see you." The reply came instantly. Yeah, I see you. Flash your lights." I blinked the high beams twice. "You see that?" "Yeah," the voice said. "That's you. Keep them on. Don't turn them off." Something in his tone made the hairs on my arms stand up. "You sure you're at 83? I asked. "Positive," he said. "Don't go nowhere. Just, don't get out." "What's going on, Luke?" I asked. The CB went silent again. For a few seconds, I thought I'd lost him to static. Then, faintly, "It's walking around out there." I gripped the mic tighter. "What is?" "I don't know," he whispered. "Been hearing it for the last hour. Sounds like it's dragging something heavy." I thought it was the wind till I saw it move. I looked out at the dark. Nothing but desert and the distant outline of low hills. No sound but the faint whistle of wine through the vents. "Describe it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer right away. Then, almost too quiet to hear, "It looks like a man, but it's wrong. Too tall. Keeps stopping when I talk. Like it's listening." Static swallowed the next few words. "Luke, listen to me," I said. "Stay in your truck. Lock your doors. I'm calling highway patrol." He came back, his voice shaking. "I tried, the phone's dead. The radio's all I've got." The line crackled, and I heard something in the background, a slow, rhythmic sound, like metal scraping on gravel. He gasped. "It's coming closer." Then there was a loud bang through the speaker, like someone had hit the mic, muffled breathing. "Luke!" I shouted. "What's happening?" No answer. Just static, then faint shuffling noises. The sound of the wind seemed to grow, like the desert itself was breathing. And then, a voice that wasn't Luke's. Deep, distorted, almost calm. "Who's this?" I froze. The signal was too clear now, too close. It sounded like the transmission wasn't coming from another truck, but from somewhere inside my own cab. "This is truck 211, I said carefully. "Who is this?" A pause. Then the voice again, lower, slower. "You shouldn't have stopped." Every nerve in my body went tight. I reached down and turned off the radio, but the speaker kept hissing. No power light, no frequency showing. Just that low static whisper that seemed to move like breath. I slammed my hand against the dash, the sound stopped. Dead silence. I waited, counting the seconds. 1. 2. 10. Then I started the engine again and got the hell back on the road. As I drove north, I passed mile marker 86. There, barely visible in the edge of my headlights, stood an old semi-truck, cab tilted slightly, rust on the hood, no lights. The windshield was shattered. It looked like it hadn't moved in decades. My hands tightened on the wheel. For a second, I considered stopping. But something deep inside told me not to. The temperature inside the cab dropped suddenly, fog blooming on the inside of my windows. And then, the CB flickered back to life. "Thanks for stopping, Ray," said Luke's voice. I almost slammed the brakes. "What the hell, Luke?" The voice was faint but steady. "Appreciate it. Didn't think anyone would come back." "Come back?" I whispered. "What do you mean?" The static grew louder, swallowing the words. But I could just barely make out. "Been out here, long time." I kept driving, eyes fixed on the road. The CB went silent again. The next morning, I stopped at a diner outside Ely. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, poured me coffee. I told her about the voice on the radio, about the truck near mile marker 86. She froze halfway through my story. You said mile 86? Yeah. Her face went pale. You must have seen Luke Patterson's rig. He died out there in 2006. They found his truck exactly where you said, out of gas, door open, no sign of him. I felt my stomach drop. 2006? That can't be. He talked to me last night. She shook her head slowly. You're not the first one to say that. Every few years, someone reports hearing his call. Same voice. Same message. Highway patrols stopped responding to it. I didn't finish my coffee. I drove straight to Reno and parked my truck for the night. I wanted to forget the whole thing, but I couldn't. 2 nights later, I turned the CB back on for the first time since then. The airwaves were quiet, no chatter, no static. Just silence. Then, without warning, a faint voice came through. Breaker 19, anyone out there? It was me. My own voice. Word for word, the same way I'd answered Luke. I stared at the radio, heart pounding, hands shaking. Who is this? I whispered. Static. Then my own voice again, distorted and distant. This is truck 211. Where you at, driver? I reached over and pulled the power cord out of the unit completely, but the speaker stayed alive for another few seconds, fading slowly, whispering the same phrase. You shouldn't have stopped. The next morning, I took the CB out entirely and threw it into a scrap bin at the yard. I don't use radios anymore. I drive in silence, no music, no chatter, nothing. But every once in a while, when I pass through the desert at night, I still hear faint static, like someone whispering in the wind, calling for help near mile marker 83. I never answer. Because whoever's calling isn't looking for rescue. They're looking for company. The end. The motel with no exit. It happened in November of 2019, on a long-haul route from Boise, Idaho to Spokane, Washington. My name's Travis Moore. I've been driving trucks since I was 21, and I've seen about everything a man can see from behind a windshield: wrecks, storms, wildfires, even a few dead stretches of road where the air itself feels wrong. But nothing, prepared me for what happened that night. It was one of those cold, bone-deep evenings when fog rolls off the mountains and the air smells like wet earth. I'd been on the road for almost 14 hours straight, running behind schedule because of a mechanical delay earlier in the day. My eyes felt like sandpaper, and the coffee in my thermos had long gone cold. I remember checking the clock on my dash, 11:22 p.m. I was somewhere north of Lewiston, weaving through forested hills, no cars in sight for miles. When the fog got too thick to see past the hood, I started looking for a turnout or somewhere to rest. The GPS showed nothing for another 20 miles, just a winding gray line through the mountains. Then, as if out of nowhere, a dim neon light blinked through the mist. Motel, vacancy. The sign flickered red and blue, the letters uneven, but it was there, standing at the edge of a small gravel lot. I slowed the rig and turned in, tires crunching over the stones. The place looked ancient, 1 story, maybe 10 rooms, peeling paint, a single lamppost buzzing with flies even in November. But at that hour, it was better than falling asleep at the wheel. I parked the truck near the edge of the lot, left the engine idling, and stepped out. The fog swallowed everything beyond 20 feet. The cold hit me hard, the kind that stings your lungs. Inside, the front desk was empty. The lobby smelled faintly of bleach and mildew. There was a bell on the counter, so I pressed it. The sound echoed down the hallway, sharp and hollow. A few seconds later, a man appeared from the back room. Thin, gray-haired, wearing a stained white shirt. He smiled, too wide, too sudden. Late night, huh, he said. Yeah, I answered. Just need a room to crash for a few hours. You got something ground floor? Sure do. Room 3, he said, sliding a tarnished brass key across the counter. Cash only. I paid him $40, signed the ledger. The pages were yellowed, the handwriting cramped and shaky. I noticed the last entry before mine was dated 2004. I frowned. You don't get a lot of traffic through here, do you? The man chuckled softly. Not lately. Most folks just drive on through. He turned and disappeared into the back without another word. Room 3 was down a narrow hallway lined with faded wallpaper. The door stuck when I tried to open it, like it hadn't been used in years. The room itself smelled of damp wood and cigarette smoke. There was a small bed, an old TV, and a single lamp casting a weak yellow light. I set my duffel on the floor and sat on the bed. The springs groaned beneath my weight. Outside, the fog pressed against the window like a living thing. I could barely make out the silhouette of my truck through it. I remember telling myself to get a few hours of sleep, then hit the road before dawn. I shut off the lamp and lay back. Somewhere between waking and sleep, I heard it, a knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps on my door. I sat up, heart pounding. The hallway was dead quiet. Yeah? I called out. No response. Maybe it was the old man, or maybe another guest. I checked the peephole, but it showed nothing. Just fog swirling outside. I waited. Silence. Finally, I lay back down. Then came the knock again, louder this time. I jumped up, grabbed the key off the nightstand, and swung the door open. The hallway was empty. The air felt heavier, colder. I stepped outside and glanced toward the front desk, but the light there was out. Only my room's lamp still glowed faintly behind me. Something about the silence was wrong. There wasn't even the hum of insects, no wind, nothing. I walked down the hall to the lobby. The counter was empty, the ledger open. The name I'd written wasn't there anymore. Instead, the page was blank except for one faint line scrawled near the top, Room 3, checked in. That was it. No date, no name, no checkout. I backed away slowly. My instincts told me to grab my bag and leave, but when I turned to head down the hall, I froze. Every door was open now. All 10 rooms. Each one dark inside. I hurried back to mine, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. I told myself it was fatigue, that I was overtired, seeing things. I turned on the TV to drown out the silence. Static. No channels, just snow on the screen. Through the noise, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft. Barefoot. Pacing slowly past my door. Then stopping. Right outside. I muted the TV. My pulse thudded in my ears. The doorknob rattled once. Twice. Then it turned all the way, but the deadbolt held. I leaned forward, whispering, "Who's there?" A woman's voice replied, calm and close. "You shouldn't have come back." I didn't move. The air in the room grew colder, my breath visible. "Back?" I said. "I've never been here before." The voice didn't answer. Just soft breathing on the other side of the door. Then, after a few seconds, the sound of bare feet walking away, slow and deliberate. I waited until I couldn't hear anything, then cracked the door open. The hallway was dark again, every door closed. Except the one at the very end, it stood wide open, light flickering inside. Against every instinct, I stepped toward it. The room was identical to mine, except for one thing, there was a suitcase on the bed. My suitcase. Same brand, same torn handle. I unzipped it, inside were my clothes, folded exactly the way I had left them at home. And on top of them, a key. Brass. Number 3. I stumbled back into the hallway, heart hammering. The exit sign above the door flickered red through the fogged glass. I ran for it. When I pushed the door open, cold air hit me, but the lot was gone. No truck. No neon sign. No road. Just fog. Thick and endless, like a wall. I turned back, but instead of the hallway, there was another door. Room 3. My room. I opened it, shaking, and stepped inside. Same bed. Same TV. Same smell. My duffel still on the floor. But now the TV wasn't static anymore. It was showing me. A live feed, me standing in the doorway, staring at myself from across the room. I backed away, the screen following my every move a second too late, like a delayed reflection. I reached for the power cord, but before I could pull it, the image changed. It showed me asleep on the bed. And someone standing over me. A figure in the corner, tall, motionless, face hidden in shadow. The light flickered once, twice, and then went out. I don't remember what happened after that. When I woke up, it was morning. Sunlight cut through the blinds. My truck was outside, covered in dew. The motel looked normal, quiet, empty, just a building on the side of the road. I packed my things fast and went to the front desk. The man was gone. The bell was dusty. No sign of anyone. I stepped outside, started the truck, and didn't look back until I hit the main highway. When I did, my blood ran cold. There was no motel. No sign. Just a stretch of forest and an old guardrail. The GPS showed nothing but open road. I called the highway patrol that afternoon, just to check. The operator told me there hadn't been a motel anywhere near that area for over 20 years. The last one, the Riverside Lodge, had burned down in 1998. 10 people dead. One of them was listed as the manager. His name was Thomas Moore. Same name as mine. That night, I checked my dash cam footage. It showed me pulling off the road into a fog bank. But instead of a building, the headlights illuminated nothing but trees and mist. When I parked the truck in my yard that weekend, I noticed something under my seat, a brass key. Number 3, tarnished and cold. I threw it into a river 2 days later. But sometimes, when the fog rolls over the mountains on long nights, I still see a faint red glow ahead, a flickering sign that reads motel, vacancy. I don't stop anymore. Because I know now, once you check in there, you never really leave. The end. Mile marker 232. It happened in March of 2021, on a cold, windy night somewhere along Highway 2 in northern Minnesota, a stretch of road so long and empty it feels like it was built just to test how much silence a man can stand. My name's Carl Jensen. I've been driving trucks for 27 years. I've seen blizzards, wrecks, animals running across lanes, and more sleepless nights than I can count. But there's one night I can't forget, no matter how many miles I drive. The night I stopped near mile marker 232. It was snowing, not the soft kind that drifts down gently, but sharp flakes carried sideways by the wind. The kind of snow that makes the air sting and blurs the edges of the world. My rig was loaded with construction materials headed for Duluth, and I was already 3 hours behind schedule because of a detour near Grand Rapids. The radio had been dead since I'd left the last town. Just static. The road was pitch black except for the thin white beam from my headlights. Around 12:30 a.m., I noticed flashing lights up ahead, red and blue, flickering weakly through the snow. At first, I thought it was a patrol car or maybe an accident. I slowed down, engine rumbling low, and rolled closer. When I reached mile marker 232, I saw it, a small pickup truck half buried in the snow, tilted off the shoulder. Its hazard lights blinked faintly through the white curtain. I pulled over and grabbed my flashlight. The snow was already up to my boots as I stepped out. The pickup's door was wide open, the engine still running, but there was no one inside. I shined the light through the cab, empty. The seat belt hung loose, the radio was on but silent, and on the passenger seat lay a cell phone, screen cracked. "Hello?" I called out over the wind. No answer. Just the endless hum of air sweeping across the highway. Then I saw footprints. A single set, leading away from the truck toward the woods that bordered the road. The snow was filling them fast, but they were fresh, maybe 20 minutes old. I hesitated. Common sense said stay put, call for help, wait in the truck. But something about the way the driver's door was open, the lights still blinking, felt wrong. Like whoever had been here hadn't just walked away, they'd run. I grabbed my jacket tighter and followed the footprints. The forest swallowed me within seconds. The sound of the highway disappeared, replaced by the low moan of trees swaying in the wind. My flashlight beam bounced between branches. The tracks wound deeper into the dark, then stopped suddenly at a small clearing. In the center stood a wooden cross, half buried in snow. No name, just a single number carved into it, 232. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I turned to go back, and that's when I saw him. A man, maybe 30 feet away, standing between the trees. Tall, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. His face was pale in the beam of my flashlight, but his eyes were fixed on me. He wasn't moving. "Hey!" I called. "You okay? You from that pickup?" No response. He just stood there, his body rigid. I took a step closer, and my boot crunched the snow. He tilted his head slightly, like a dog hearing a noise. Then he spoke, voice calm but hollow. "You shouldn't be here." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "You hurt?" I asked again. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked past me, toward the highway. "You stopped," he said softly. "No one ever stops." The wind picked up, carrying a low, almost human sound through the trees, like a whisper or a sigh. I turned for half a second to glance behind me, and when I looked back, the man was gone. I ran back toward the highway, breath fogging in front of me. But when I reached the road, the pickup was gone too. No tire marks, no lights, no sign it had ever been there. Only the snow-covered shoulder and my own footprints. I climbed back into my truck, shaking, and slammed the door. My windshield was icing over fast. I turned the heater on full blast and sat there for a minute, trying to steady my breathing. Then I noticed something in the mirror. Headlights, faint, coming from behind me. Another vehicle was approaching, slowly, carefully, through the snow. As it drew closer, I could make out the shape, a small pickup. The same one I'd just seen. It stopped right behind me. The driver's door opened. I leaned forward, squinting through the mirrors, but all I could see was a dark figure stepping out. The man's silhouette moved toward the middle of the road, then stopped. The lights from my truck hit his face. It was the same man I'd seen in the woods. He stared straight at me, expression blank, snow gathering on his shoulders. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and pointed toward the woods behind me. I froze. I didn't want to look, but something made me turn. In the glare of my taillights, just past the trees, stood a second truck, identical to mine. Same color, same number on the door. Engine off, lights dim. I blinked hard, thinking I was seeing double. But when I looked again, the man was gone, and both trucks were gone too. Only my own headlights cut through the snow. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes before I started driving again. I told myself it was fatigue, that I'd imagine it all. But 20 miles later, I saw something that made me pull over again, another wooden cross, this one smaller, nailed to a tree at the edge of the highway. Same carving, 232. By the time I reached Duluth, it was dawn. I didn't mention what happened to anyone, not even the dispatcher. But the image of that man in the woods wouldn't leave me. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I stopped by a diner off the same route, the kind of place where the locals know everything that happens for 50 miles. I asked the waitress if she knew anything about mile marker 232. Her face changed instantly. "You didn't stop there, did you?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Why?" She lowered her voice. "That spot's cursed. There was a crash there 20 years ago. A pickup slid off the road in a snowstorm. Driver died on impact. They say sometimes people still see his lights blinking in the snow. Every time someone stops to help, the same thing happens." "What happens?" I asked. She swallowed. "A week later, someone else dies at the same mile marker." I wanted to laugh it off, but she wasn't smiling. That night, back at the yard, I cleaned the cab of my truck. When I lifted the floor mat on the passenger side, something fell out, a small metal keychain shaped like a cross. I didn't own one. The number 232 was engraved into the metal. I threw it out immediately, but the next morning, it was back on my dashboard. The metal was ice cold, and my breath fogged the windshield though the engine hadn't even started. I don't drive Highway 2 anymore. I reroute every time, even if it costs me hours. Other drivers laugh, tell me ghosts don't hitch rides. But they haven't seen what I saw that night, a man standing in a snowstorm, pointing toward his own grave. The last time I passed near that area, I couldn't help glancing toward the shoulder. There, half buried in snow, was a small wooden cross. Freshly painted. And below it, a rusted metal tag, a trucker's license plate number. My own. I didn't stop. And I never will again. The end. Frozen delivery. It happened in January of 2017, right in the middle of the coldest winter the Dakotas had seen in over a decade. My name's Mark Weaver. I've been driving refrigerated freight most of my career, meat, dairy, frozen goods, anything that needs to stay cold. But that night, cold became something else entirely. It wasn't just weather anymore. It felt alive. I was hauling a full load of frozen poultry from Fargo, North Dakota, to a distribution hub near Billings, Montana. The route was familiar, Highway 85 to 200, then west until the Rockies started to rise. I'd driven it dozens of times, but that night was different. Temperatures had dropped to 30 below zero, and the snow was coming down so thick it blurred the world into one endless sheet of white. The radio kept cutting in and out. No chatter. No weather updates. Just static and the hum of the engine. Around midnight, I passed through a small town called Bowman. Every window was dark, every street empty. After that, there was nothing for hours, just open plains and ice-covered road. The trailer thermometer read -21 degrees Fahrenheit and holding steady. Everything was normal until I heard it, a sound from the back of the truck. At first it was faint, muffled, like something sliding or shifting against metal. I figured it was just the load settling. But then it came again, slow, rhythmic, like someone knocking softly from inside the trailer. 3 dull thuds. Pause. Then 3 more. I turned down the heater and the hum of the fan to listen. Nothing but the tires on snow. I told myself I was hearing things. Long nights can play tricks on you, especially when you've been awake too long. But 10 minutes later, the knocking came back. Louder. It sounded human. I gripped the wheel tighter, my pulse quickening. There was no way anyone could be back there, the trailer had been sealed and padlocked at the plant. I'd checked it myself. Still, the noise continued, steady and deliberate, like someone trying to get my attention. I pulled onto the shoulder and idled the engine. The wind screamed around the cab. For a moment, everything outside was just white darkness and the sound of my own breath. I climbed out, boots crunching through the snow, and made my way to the rear of the trailer. The cold hit me like a wall, the kind that hurts to breathe. I unlatched the padlock with shaking hands and opened the doors. A blast of frozen air rushed out, burning my face. The interior lights flickered weakly, revealing rows of shrink-wrapped pallets stacked neatly from floor to ceiling. Everything looked normal. No movement. No footprints. Just the hum of the refrigeration unit and the white vapor of my breath. Then I saw it. A single handprint on the inside wall. It was faint but unmistakable, a human hand, pressed into the frost, each finger clearly defined. I froze. The handprint wasn't there when I checked the load at the plant. I was sure of it. I backed away slowly, slammed the doors shut, and locked them tight. I climbed back into the cab and told myself to keep driving. The mind plays tricks, I thought. Condensation. Patterns. Nothing more. But as the miles passed, the knocking returned. Louder this time. Faster. Like fists pounding on metal. I tried to drown it out with the radio, but the static only seemed to echo it. My hands were trembling. I shouted over my shoulder, "There's nobody back there." As if saying it would make it true. Then, for the first time, I heard something else, a voice. It was faint, carried through the thin metal wall behind me. A man's voice. Hoarse. Slow. "Let me out." I slammed the brakes, the trailer fishtailing behind me until the rig stopped sideways on the road. My heart was hammering. Every instinct screamed to drive away and never look back. But what if someone really was in there? What if a worker had gotten trapped by accident? I grabbed my flashlight, stepped back out into the storm, and made my way once more to the rear. The snow was coming down heavier now, stinging my eyes. I pulled the latch, yanked open the doors, and froze again. This time, the light barely reached past the first few pallets. The air inside shimmered with ice crystals. And then, as I swept the beam across the walls, I saw dozens of handprints, overlapping, scattered, climbing the metal panels. Every one of them facing inward, as if pressed from the inside. The hair on my neck stood on end. My flashlight flickered once, then died completely. The darkness swallowed me whole. That's when I heard breathing. Not mine. Deeper, slower, coming from somewhere inside the trailer. I slammed the doors shut and ran for the cab, slipping on the ice. My hands barely worked as I jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I took off, tires spinning, the trailer swaying behind me. For the next 30 miles, the knocking didn't stop. It came in waves, sometimes frantic, sometimes soft, always there. When I finally reached a way station outside Ekalaka, I pulled in, shaking, and jumped down before the truck even stopped moving. The attendant, a middle-aged guy in a thick parka, came out of the booth. "You all right, driver? You look like hell." "There's something in my trailer," I said. My voice sounded distant, unreal. "Someone's trapped in there." He frowned. "Locked shipment?" "Sealed," I said. "From Fargo. Frozen poultry." He grabbed a crowbar and followed me to the back. We broke the seal and swung open the doors together. The interior lights flicked on, and everything was still. No noise. No movement. But the walls were covered in frost patterns shaped like handprints. Hundreds of them. Some small, some large, all smeared as if they'd been pressed in desperation. The attendant looked at me. "Jesus Christ. You see this?" I nodded, unable to speak. He climbed up, tapped one of the marks. The frost flaked off under his glove. Beneath it was bare metal, no scratches, no dents, no sign of life. "It's empty," he said finally. "Nobody here." I climbed back into the cab, trying to process what I'd seen. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Then he called out from the back. "Hey, this door looks weird. Like it's been frozen shut before." He pointed to the inside latch. Embedded deep in the metal handle was a faint impression, the shape of fingers gripping it from within. We resealed the trailer, and I finished the delivery the next morning. The foreman at the warehouse took one look at the cargo and said the same thing every receiver says: "Seal's intact, looks fine." I didn't tell him about the handprints. Or the voice. Or the knocking that I could still hear in my head, even with the engine off. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that trailer, that frozen air, those prints. I called the shipping plant to ask if they'd ever had accidents involving locked-in workers. The dispatcher on the other end went quiet for a long moment, then said, "That truck used to belong to our old carrier partner. They shut down after an incident years ago. Guy froze to death inside a refrigerated unit. Tried to claw his way out." I hung up. The next week, I checked my logbook for the delivery. The timestamp for the way station stop was 3:17 a.m. But the station attendant later told me their cameras showed no trucks that night. None at all. Sometimes, when I haul freezer loads now, I still hear faint thuds from the back, soft, steady, almost patient. I don't check anymore. I turn up the engine and drive faster. Last winter, during a maintenance check, my mechanic called me into the garage. "You been hauling anything strange?" he asked. He pointed at the inside of my trailer door. Under a thin layer of new paint, barely visible, were the words scratched into the metal in shaky letters, "Let me out." I sold that trailer the next day. But sometimes, when the temperature drops below freezing and the wind howls across the plains, my new rig creaks in a way that sounds like someone knocking, slow, steady, polite. And no matter how loud the engine gets, I can still hear it. The bridge with no sound. It happened in late October of 2015, on a foggy night in the mountains of West Virginia. My name's Henry Dalton. I've been a trucker most of my life, 31 years behind the wheel, and I've crossed just about every back road and mountain pass in the eastern United States. But there's one place I'll never go near again, a narrow steel bridge off Route 33, the one locals call Old Carter's Crossing. That night, I was hauling lumber from Elkins to Charleston, running the overnight schedule to make the morning drop. The air was thick with fog, rolling down from the mountains like smoke. It was just past midnight, and I hadn't seen another vehicle for more than an hour. The road was slick, winding, the kind that makes your stomach tense with every turn. I'd planned to stop before the next town, but I missed the rest area exit in the fog. Then the GPS glitched, it froze, then rerouted me to a faster detour down an old service road that I didn't recognize. I hesitated but decided to follow it. It looked like it rejoined the main highway about 15 miles ahead. The first few miles were fine, narrow, but paved. Then I reached a bridge. It appeared suddenly out of the fog, a long, steel truss bridge stretching over a deep ravine. The metal beams were rusted, and the old wooden planks underneath looked slick with moisture. A faded sign stood at the entrance, "Carter's Bridge, 1947. Weight limit 10 tons. My rig weighed nearly 30. I should have turned around right there, but the fog was so thick I couldn't even find a safe place to back up. The GPS insisted it was the only route forward. I rolled down the window and leaned out. No sound. No wind. Not even the usual hum of the river below. Just silence, complete, heavy, unnatural silence. I eased the truck forward. The tires creaked on the boards. The bridge stretched longer than it should have, disappearing into fog on both ends. I kept my eyes on the yellow center line, trying not to look down. Halfway across, the sound stopped entirely. No hum from the engine. No rattle of the trailer. Nothing. It was as if the world had gone mute. I could see the engine gauges moving, could feel the vibrations under me, but there wasn't a single sound. Even the air inside the cab felt thick and wrong, like the silence had weight. I tapped the horn. The button clicked, but there was no noise. Then, through the windshield, I saw movement. A set of headlights appeared ahead, faint at first, then brighter, coming from the opposite end of the bridge. Another truck. Same shape, same height. Its lights were yellowed, old-fashioned, the kind you only see on rigs from decades ago. I slowed to a crawl. There was no room for two trucks on that bridge. The beams groaned under my weight. The headlights ahead stayed steady, unmoving, as if the other driver hadn't noticed me. I flashed my high beams twice, nothing. Then the fog shifted, and for a split second, I could see it clearly. The truck was identical to mine. Same company name on the door. Same number. Same color. I blinked, my stomach twisting. When I looked again, the cab lights flickered, and I realized I couldn't see a driver inside. Just an empty seat and the faint shape of a steering wheel turning on its own. I slammed the brakes. The trailer swayed behind me, the bridge groaning under the strain. The other truck didn't stop, it rolled forward silently, its lights cutting through the fog, getting closer, closer, until the glare filled my cab. I threw the truck into reverse, heart hammering, tires screeching silently against the boards, still no sound. The air felt like it was closing in, pressing against me. The headlights grew brighter, blinding. And then, in a blink, they were gone. Just fog again. The bridge empty. I sat frozen, my breath fogging the glass. The gauges flickered. The CB radio hissed, but it wasn't normal static. It sounded like whispers. Hundreds of them, overlapping, too faint to understand. Then a single voice broke through. Deep, distant, and close all at once. You shouldn't have crossed. I slammed the gearshift forward and drove. The bridge stretched on endlessly. I should have been across in seconds, but the road ahead never changed. Fog. Beams. Wooden planks. My headlights bouncing off the same rusted girders again and again. Panic clawed at me. I pressed harder on the gas. The speedometer climbed, 40, 50, 60, but the scenery never changed. I yelled just to hear my own voice, but even that made no sound. My throat moved, my chest strained, but there was nothing. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone walking along the edge of the bridge. It was a man, tall, wearing a heavy coat and an old trucker's cap. His clothes looked wet, hanging heavy, and his face was pale under the headlights. He didn't look at me. He just walked slowly, dragging his right hand along the rail, leaving a dark trail on the metal. I slowed down, terrified to pass him, but when I blinked, he was suddenly right beside my window. His head turned sharply, eyes hollow, lips moving. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see what he was saying. No sound. His hand slammed against the glass, leaving a frozen print. Then he was gone. The lights of the bridge flickered, the fog split apart for a moment, and finally, I saw the other end. I hit the gas, the tires screeching again in silence. The instant I crossed the last beam, the sound came rushing back all at once, the roar of the engine, the wind, the clatter of loose bolts. I pulled over on the far side, shaking, and jumped out. The air felt normal again, cold, sharp, alive. Behind me, the fog swallowed the bridge completely. When I tried to take a step closer, my phone buzzed in my pocket, no signal. But the clock on the dash had jumped ahead 3 hours. I drove until sunrise before I stopped again. At a diner in Ripley, I asked the old man behind the counter if he'd heard of Carter's Bridge. He frowned. That old thing? It collapsed in the 80s. Whole rig went down with it. Driver never found. I stared at him. It's still standing. I just crossed it. He shook his head slowly. No, son. They tore down what was left 10 years ago. Ain't been a bridge there since. When I checked my dash cam later that week, the footage showed me turning onto a narrow road and entering a fog bank. Then, static. Nothing but gray for 3 straight hours. The recording resumed with me already back on the highway, breathing hard, muttering to myself, no sound. No sound. That phrase stuck with me. A few months later, another driver from our company took that same route. His truck was found idling on the shoulder near the ravine, headlights pointed at empty air. The bridge wasn't there, just open space and the river below. He was gone. The troopers said they found something carved into the steering wheel of his cab. 2 words, scratched deep into the leather, no sound. Since then, I don't trust GPS detours, no matter how short they are. I stick to the main highways, even if it means hours more driving. Sometimes, on foggy nights, when I roll down the window to clear my head, the wind drops away completely for a second. In that silence, I can still hear the echo of my own voice that night, the voice that made no sound. And somewhere out there, maybe still standing in the fog, there's a man in a trucker's cap, dragging his hand along rusted steel, waiting for someone else to cross. The end. The Hitchhiker in the Fog. It happened in early November of 2020, somewhere along Highway 212 in eastern Montana, a quiet, desolate road that runs through miles of flat land and disappears into endless mist when the weather turns cold. My name's Aaron Miles. I've been driving long-haul freight for 15 years, and I've picked up my fair share of hitchhikers over the years, especially in the plains. Most of them are harmless, just people trying to get somewhere. But there's one I'll never forget. That night was foggy, the kind of thick, heavy fog that eats the world beyond your headlights. I was hauling steel beams westbound from Sioux Falls to Billings, and I'd been driving for nearly 16 hours straight. My coffee was gone, my eyes were burning, and the only sound in the cab was the low hum of the tires against wet asphalt. It was around 1 a.m. when I saw him. A figure standing on the shoulder of the highway, barely visible through the mist. He was waving one arm slowly, like he wasn't sure I'd see him. His clothes looked dark, heavy, maybe an old jacket or uniform, and he was carrying something in his other hand, a small duffel bag. Instinct said to keep driving. You don't stop for anyone at that hour, not in that fog, not on that stretch of road. But I'd been out there for hours without seeing another soul. Something about him looked lost, not dangerous, just desperate. Against my better judgment, I slowed down and pulled over. I rolled down the passenger window. You need a ride somewhere? He leaned forward into the glow of my headlights. His face was pale, with deep shadows under his eyes, and frost clung to the edges of his beard. Yeah, he said quietly. Just down the road. Thank you. His voice was calm, steady, polite. I unlocked the door, and he climbed in without a word. The air that came in with him was freezing, colder than it should have been, even with the window open. He set his bag at his feet and folded his hands in his lap. Appreciate it, he said again, looking straight ahead. No problem, I replied. You from around here? He paused, then shook his head. Used to be. That phrase hung in the air longer than it should have. I nodded, eyes on the road, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. For a few minutes, we rode in silence. The fog pressed against the windshield, thick as milk. The man sat completely still, not shifting, not rubbing his hands for warmth. Just staring ahead. After a while, I tried again. Where exactly do you need to go? There's a diner, he said softly. Right after the bridge. You'll see it. I frowned. There's no diner out here. Closest one's back in Broadus. He didn't respond. The road curved slightly, revealing the faint outline of a bridge ahead, a narrow, two-lane span over a small river I'd crossed before. I slowed down out of habit. The fog thickened as we reached the center, and that's when I noticed something strange. In the reflection of the windshield, the passenger seat looked empty. I blinked, glanced over, he was still there, sitting calmly, staring forward. But in the glass, in the faint reflection of the dashboard, there was no shape beside mine. Just the outline of the seat. My stomach tightened. I tried to tell myself it was just the angle, the light, the fog, anything but what my brain was whispering. I gripped the wheel tighter. You okay? I asked. He turned his head slowly toward me. His eyes were gray, almost colorless. You shouldn't stop for people out here, he said quietly. The tone wasn't threatening. It was like a warning, calm, final, absolute. Before I could respond, the engine sputtered. The dashboard lights dimmed, flickered once, then went out. The truck coasted to a stop in the middle of the bridge. Damn it, I muttered, turning the key again. The engine coughed, but nothing caught. The headlights dimmed further, the fog closing in around us. The man in the passenger seat didn't move. It happens, he said softly. Happened to me, too. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely steady. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached down and picked up his duffel bag. He opened it slowly, his hands moving in deliberate, careful motions. I leaned slightly to look, but there was nothing inside. Just emptiness. Then he said, You can let me off here. In the middle of the bridge? I asked. You sure? He nodded once. This is where I left it. I didn't understand what he meant, but I wasn't about to argue. I unlocked the doors, and he climbed out silently. The cold air rushed in again. He closed the door gently behind him and began walking toward the edge of the bridge, disappearing into the fog within seconds. I waited. After a minute, I climbed out too, flashlight in hand. Hey! I shouted into the mist. You good? No answer. The only sound was the river below, faint and distant. I walked toward the spot where he disappeared. The fog thinned just enough for me to see the railing. It was bent, twisted, the metal darkened with rust. And there, tied around the post, was a strip of faded yellow fabric, maybe a piece of a jacket. It fluttered slightly in the wind. I stepped closer. The flashlight beam fell on something below, a small shape on the rocks by the water. At first, I thought it was a tarp or debris. Then I realized it was a wrecked truck, half buried in the mud. My blood ran cold. It was the same make and model as mine. Same color. Same logo. And standing beside it, faint in the mist, was a figure, tall, still, wearing a dark jacket. The same man. He looked up at me and smiled. Then he was gone. The fog swallowed everything. I stumbled back to my cab, slammed the door, and twisted the ignition. The engine started instantly. Lights came back on like nothing had happened. I threw it into gear and drove. When I hit the main road again, the fog lifted suddenly, like it had never been there. The air was clear, cold, still. My watch said it was 4:15 a.m. I'd been on that bridge for over 3 hours. Later that morning, I stopped at a diner outside Billings. I told the waitress about what happened, the fog, the hitchhiker, the bridge. Her face went pale halfway through my story. "You said Highway 212? "Yeah," I said. "Just before the old bridge." She nodded slowly. "There used to be a diner there, years ago. Washed away when the bridge collapsed. A truck went off it in the fog. They said the driver picked up a hitchhiker right before it happened." I stared at her. "When was that?" 1985, she said quietly. "They never found the hitchhiker's body. Only the driver's." I left without finishing my meal. When I got back to my truck, there was moisture on the passenger seat, a patch of water, small, perfectly round, like someone had been sitting there with clothes still wet from fog. The duffel bag was on the floor. It wasn't mine. Inside, there was nothing, just cold air and a faint smell of river water. I threw it out behind the diner and drove straight through to Billings. For the next few weeks, I couldn't sleep without dreaming of that fog, that bridge, that silent man walking away into the mist. A month later, another driver from our company mentioned seeing someone waving on the same stretch of road. A tall man with a bag. He didn't stop. But when he looked in his rearview mirror, he swore he saw the man sitting in the passenger seat. Now, every time I drive through fog, I keep my eyes straight ahead. If I see someone on the shoulder, I don't slow down. I don't even blink. Because out there, not everyone who asks for a last call from dispatch. It happened in late February of 2014, somewhere along Interstate 40 between Oklahoma City and Amarillo. My name's Doug Harris, and I've been a long-haul driver for 20 years. I've worked with the same freight company for most of that time, always running night routes, always keeping in touch through dispatch. That night started like any other, until the call came through. The weather was clear but cold, the kind of still winter night where sound travels far. The highway was empty, stretching flat in both directions. I had a load of machine parts headed to Albuquerque, and I'd planned to make the state line by dawn. The clock on my dash said 12:43 a.m. when the CB crackled. "Truck 78, you copy?" The voice was familiar. Low, calm, professional. It was my dispatcher, Rick Miller. I'd known him for years. He was one of those guys who always kept his cool, no matter what went wrong. "Copy that," I said. "What's up, Rick?" Static buzzed for a moment before his voice came through again. "Need you to make a pickup before you hit Amarillo. Urgent transfer. GPS coordinates coming through now." I frowned. "Pickup? That wasn't on the schedule." "Just came in," he said. "Short run. You'll be compensated." "Where's it at?" I asked. There was a pause, then the coordinates appeared on my tablet, a spot labeled Kilmer Storage Depot. I didn't recognize it. It wasn't a commercial address. Just a pin off an old service road north of the highway. I hesitated. You sure this is legit? Looks off the grid. Rick chuckled softly. Yeah, it's a company warehouse. Low traffic. We use it for overflow. Just grab the sealed crate and roll on. Shouldn't take long. All right, I said reluctantly. If you say so. Appreciate it, he replied. Be careful on that road. Radio cuts out sometimes. The line went silent after that. I drove another 30 miles before I saw the turnoff, a narrow dirt road branching north, barely wide enough for the rig. The headlights caught a faded metal sign that read Kilmer Industrial Supply. It looked abandoned. The paint was peeling, the letters rusted. I followed the road for about half a mile until a chain-link fence appeared ahead. Beyond it stood a low concrete warehouse, no lights, no vehicles, nothing. The gate was unlocked. Something about the place felt wrong immediately, too quiet, too empty. But I was on company time, and Rick had never steered me wrong before. I parked near the loading dock, grabbed my clipboard, and climbed down. The night was cold enough to sting my nose. The air smelled faintly metallic, like old oil and dust. I knocked on the side door marked office. No answer. I tried the handle, it opened easily. Inside, the building was pitch dark except for the faint glow of the exit signs. My flashlight beam swept across empty shelves, crates, and stacks of broken pallets. Everything was coated in dust. There were footprints on the floor, not fresh, but visible, leading deeper inside. Hello? I called. My voice echoed through the warehouse. Pick up for Freightway Logistics. No reply. The sound of dripping water echoed somewhere in the distance. I started walking, following the footprints until I reached the loading area. There, under a single hanging bulb, sat a wooden crate on a dolly. It was about chest high, sealed shut with metal clasps. A piece of paper was taped to the top with my truck number written on it in red marker. For a second, I just stood there. Someone had been expecting me. I wheeled the crate toward the dock door. As I reached for the switch to open it, my flashlight flickered. The bulb above me swayed slightly, though there was no draft. Then my CB came to life again, loud and sharp in the silence. Truck 78, status? I froze. The voice wasn't coming from the radio in my cab, it was echoing faintly from somewhere inside the building. I turned toward the sound. Rick? Static filled the air. Then his voice again, closer this time. Doug, confirm pickup. Yeah, I called. I got it. How are you transmitting? I'm not in the truck. Silence. Then, through the static, a faint whisper, don't stay there. My stomach twisted. Rick? You breaking up? No response. I pushed the dolly faster, heart pounding. As I reached the dock, I heard a metallic clang behind me, something falling over in the dark. I spun the flashlight around. A crowbar lay on the floor, rolling slightly. Then I saw movement near the far wall. A figure. Tall. Still. Watching. Hey! I shouted. Who's there? No answer. The light caught the edge of something reflective, maybe a badge or a strip of glass, then the figure moved, slow and silent, slipping behind a stack of pallets. That was enough. I left the crate where it was and ran for the exit. When I burst outside, the night air felt like a shock. My truck sat exactly where I'd left it, engine idling softly. I climbed in, slammed the door, and locked it. I grabbed the CB mic. Rick, you still there? Static. Then his voice came through again, distorted, almost distant. You made the pickup? I'm leaving, I said. There's someone here, man. This place isn't right. Stay put, he said calmly. We're sending someone to assist. No, I snapped. I'm done. I'm getting back on the highway. He hesitated. Then, quietly, "Doug, don't drive away." The engine sputtered. The lights dimmed. Every gauge on the dash dropped to 0. I stared at the radio. "Rick, what the hell's going on?" Static filled the cabin again. Then a different voice came through, same tone, same calmness, but wrong. The pitch was lower, slower. "You shouldn't be here, driver." I threw the truck in gear, slammed the pedal, and tore down the dirt road. The fence loomed up ahead, the gate still open. As I passed through, my headlights caught something standing beside the warehouse door, a man in a dark jacket, watching me leave. He didn't move. Didn't even flinch when the light hit him. When I reached the main road, I didn't stop until I was 20 miles away. I pulled into a rest stop, shaking, and grabbed my phone. I called dispatch. A woman answered. "Freightway Logistics, this is Karen." "Karen, I need Rick. It's urgent." Silence on the other end. Then she said, "Doug. Rick passed away 3 days ago. Heart attack. His line's been reassigned." I sat there, gripping the phone so hard it creaked. "That's not possible," I whispered. "He just called me. Sent me to a pickup. Kilmer Storage." She paused. "That location's been shut down since 2009. We don't operate there anymore." I didn't say another word. I hung up and just sat there in the dark, listening to the engine hum. When I finally climbed out to stretch my legs, I noticed something in the snow behind the trailer, deep parallel tracks leading from the back door to the edge of the lot. Like something had been dragged out. I opened the trailer, half expecting to see the crate. But it was empty. Just the smell of cold air and dust. That morning, when I filed my log sheet, the system showed no record of any dispatch call after 11:45 p.m. No new route. No coordinates. No audio. Nothing. The following week, I drove past that stretch of road again. The turnoff was gone. Just open fields. Not even tire ruts where the dirt road had been. Still, sometimes when I'm on night routes, my CB flickers on with that same familiar voice. Calm. Confident. "Truck 78, you copy?" I don't answer anymore. Because I know Rick's voice isn't coming from dispatch. And whatever's using it wants me to come back. The end. Fuel stop ghost. It happened in August of 2013, just outside of Lubbock, Texas, flat, dry land that stretches forever, where the nights are quiet enough that you can hear your own heartbeat. My name's Robert Kane. I've been a trucker since I was 19. Seen all kinds of strange things on the road, mirages, wrecks, lost animals, even people walking highways at 3 a.m. But that night, I stopped at a gas station that doesn't exist anymore, and I met a man who never should have been there. It was about 2:15 in the morning. I was hauling furniture from Dallas to Albuquerque, fighting exhaustion. The sky was starless, pitch black, no towns for miles. My fuel gauge was hovering just above empty. I'd planned to stop in Littlefield, but the fog had rolled in thick and sudden, and the GPS lost signal. I remember feeling that slow, creeping panic when you realize your options are running out. Then I saw a glow up ahead, a flickering red and white sign through the mist. It looked like a gas station. I slowed down, relieved, and pulled off onto the gravel shoulder. The station was small, old-fashioned, a single pump island under a rusted canopy, the sign above it half-lit, Gulf Star Fuel. The kind of place that looked like it hadn't seen a customer since the 80s. But the lights were on, the pump numbers glowing faintly. I parked next to the diesel lane, killed the engine, and climbed down. The air was still and heavy. No sound but the ticking of my cooling engine and the faint buzz of the fluorescent bulbs overhead. Inside, a single light flickered above the counter. Behind it stood an older man, late 60s, maybe thin, with deep lines carved into his face. He wore a dark vest over a flannel shirt and a trucker cap with the Gulf Star logo. "Evenin'," he said as I stepped in. His voice was calm, slow, polite. "Evenin'," I replied. Didn't think I'd find a place open out here. He nodded slightly. Most folks drive on through. But we keep the lights on for travelers. The smell in the store was strange, a mix of gasoline, dust, and something faintly sweet, like old flowers. I grabbed a coffee from the counter, the kind that sits too long on the warmer. "You runnin' west?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, pouring sugar into the cup. "Albuquerque by morning, if I can stay awake." He smiled faintly. "Long road ahead. You picked the wrong night for it." "What do you mean?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just stared at me for a long moment, his eyes pale and tired. Then he said, "Storm's comin'. Best fill up and keep going." I nodded, paid in cash, and stepped back outside. The fog had thickened. I couldn't see more than 10 feet past the hood. The pumps hissed softly as I fueled up. Everything felt muted, too quiet, too still. As I finished and capped the tank, I noticed movement in the corner of my eye, a man standing by the road, just beyond the light. He was facing away from me, motionless. His clothes looked wet, dark, and heavy. "Hey!" I called out. "You all right?" No response. He didn't move. I took a few steps toward him, the gravel crunching under my boots. "You need help, buddy?" The man turned his head slightly, and for a second I saw his face, pale, hollow-eyed, skin gray in the fog. Then, just as suddenly, he was gone. The space where he'd been was empty. My heart jumped. I spun around toward the station, half expecting someone else to be watching. But the lights inside were off. The entire building was dark. I walked back to the door and tried the handle. Locked. I cupped my hands to the glass, the interior was pitch black. The counter was empty. The coffee machine was gone. No man, no light, no sound. I turned toward my truck. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd pulled into the wrong place entirely, that exhaustion was messing with me. But my fuel receipt was still in my hand. Printed right on it, Gulf Star Fuel, Route 89. Time, 2:17 a.m. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine. The radio flickered to life for a split second, but instead of music, it played a faint voice, crackling, distant. "Didn't think you'd stop tonight." I froze. It was the same voice as the man behind the counter. I switched the radio off and pulled back onto the highway. The fog swallowed the station behind me, and within a mile, it was gone. Just black road and the faint glow of my dashboard. By dawn, the fog lifted, and I reached a rest area outside Tucumcari. I needed to know if what I'd seen had really happened. I asked the attendant there if he knew of a Gulf Star station along Route 89. He looked at me like I'd said something strange. "Ain't no stations out there anymore," he said. "Closest one shut down years ago. Burned down, actually. 'Bout 2008. Guy died in the fire, old manager. They say sometimes truckers still see the lights, though." I laughed, shaky and nervous. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "No, sir. It's one of those things folks talk about. They call it the ghost stop. Happens maybe once every few years. Someone runs low on gas, sees the lights, pulls and swears they talked to an old man behind the counter. I didn't tell him I had the receipt in my pocket. That night, I took it out again. The ink had smudged from the heat, but I could still read it. The time, the station name, everything. I turned it over and froze. On the back, written in faint, shaky handwriting, were 5 words, "You shouldn't have stopped here." I didn't sleep much that night. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see headlights behind me, or a figure on the shoulder. A few days later, when I got home, I looked up the coordinates of the place. According to every map and satellite image I could find, there was nothing there. Just empty dirt. No building, no foundation, no fuel tanks. But the next week, when I checked my credit statement, there was another charge from Gulf Star Fuel. Same amount. Same time. 2 days later. I hadn't been anywhere near Texas. The company said it must have been a system glitch. But I still have that receipt, sealed in a drawer in my house. Every year or so, the ink fades a little more, but that handwriting on the back, the warning, stays dark. Last month, a younger driver in our company told me he'd seen a small gas station on a foggy night off Route 89. Same sign. Same flickering lights. He stopped, talked to an old man who told him to keep the lights on for travelers. When he finished telling me, I asked if he'd kept the receipt. He nodded. Yeah, weird thing, though, he said. No address printed on it. Just the name. Gulfstar Fuel? I asked. He froze. Yeah. How'd you know? I didn't answer. I just told him to throw it away and never take that route again after dark. Because I know what he doesn't, that place burned down with the doors locked. The man inside was found near the counter, one hand on the register. The other was still holding a pen. And sometimes, when you stop there, he writes your name on a new receipt. The end. The convoy that never was. It happened in September of 2018, on a long, empty stretch of Interstate 10, somewhere between El Paso and Tucson. My name's Frank Lawson. I've been on the road most of my adult life, 28 years hauling freight across the country. You learn to tell what's real out there and what's just the road playing tricks on you. But sometimes, the line between those two things gets too thin. And that night, I crossed it. The weather was perfect, cool desert air, a clear sky, and a full moon hanging low. I'd left El Paso around 9 p.m. with a trailer full of automotive parts bound for Phoenix. The route was familiar, hundreds of miles of straight asphalt and nothing but sand, brush, and distant mountains. By midnight, the road was completely deserted. No taillights, no headlights, just the hum of my engine and the faint crackle of static on the CB. I remember checking the clock, 12:37 a.m. That's when I saw the lights ahead. At first, I thought it was a line of trucks, a convoy. 6, maybe 7 rigs, moving in perfect formation. Their red taillights glowed faintly through the desert haze. It wasn't unusual, convoys happen all the time. Maybe a company run or military transport. I picked up speed to close the distance a bit, just to have some company on the road. But as I got closer, something didn't feel right. All their lights were dim, old, uneven, flickering like they were running on dying batteries. The trucks moved too smoothly, too perfectly, each one keeping the exact same space between them. No variation, no drifting, no brake flashes. Just flawless motion. I tried the CB. This is truck 93 westbound. You boys running together tonight? Static. No reply. I tried again. Convoy up ahead, copy? Still nothing. The strange thing was, the closer I got, the quieter the cab felt. The hum of my tires seemed to fade. Even the wind outside the window disappeared, leaving only the low rumble of my engine. At 12:45, I was less than 100 yards behind the last truck in the line. It was an old model, maybe a 70s Freightliner, but it looked brand new. No dirt, no rust, not a single scratch. I eased into the left lane to pass, keeping a cautious distance. As I pulled up alongside, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The driver's cab was dark. No interior lights, no glow from the dash. Just pitch black. I couldn't see anyone behind the wheel. I slowed down slightly, trying to look through the window. The reflection from my headlights caught the glass for a second, and I realized it wasn't reflecting at all. It was completely opaque, like someone had painted over it from the inside. Then, through the static of the CB, a faint voice came through. "You're not supposed to be here." I froze. The voice was calm, mechanical, almost flat. I grabbed the mic. "Who is this?" No answer. The static hissed again, louder now, filling the cab. Then the same voice, identical tone, "Stay in line." The lights of the convoy brightened slightly, all at once, like someone had turned a dimmer switch. Without thinking, I eased off the gas. The truck ahead of me kept moving, perfectly steady. The one in front of it did the same. All of them, synchronized, each taillight pulsing in rhythm, a slow, steady beat, like a heartbeat. That's when I noticed the mile markers. They'd stopped changing. I looked again, still the same number, 173. I'd been driving for nearly 10 minutes, and it hadn't changed once. I pressed harder on the accelerator, heart hammering. The speedometer climbed, 60, 70, 80, but the convoy stayed exactly the same distance ahead, never closer, never farther. I grabbed the CB again. Dispatch, this is truck 93. You copy? Static. Any unit, come in. I'm westbound I-10, mile marker 173. Something's wrong here. The radio went silent for a second, then crackled to life. You shouldn't have left the line. It was the same voice. Calm. Hollow. The lights of the convoy flared bright red, so bright they filled the cab like brake lights reflecting off a wall. I slammed the brakes, tires screaming. When I stopped, my headlight shone directly on the last trailer. The logo painted on the back was faded, barely visible, Westline Transport Incorporated. That company had gone under in 1989. I knew because my father had worked for them. My breath caught in my throat. I'd seen that same logo when I was a kid, same font, same eagle emblem. My dad's last run before he disappeared was on a Westline route heading west on I-10. They never found his truck. The CB clicked again. You're late, Frank. I dropped the mic. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. How do you know my name? I said out loud. No response. The last truck in the convoy lurched forward, and the rest followed, all moving faster now, the red lights pulsing quicker. I tried to back up, but the engine stalled. The lights on my dash flickered, and the CB hissed again. Then I heard it, faint at first, then clearer. A voice I hadn't heard in 30 years. Son, stay in your lane. It was my father's voice. Every hair on my neck stood up. I turned slowly toward the passenger seat. For just a split second, I saw him sitting there, face pale, eyes tired, dressed in his old blue jacket. Then he was gone. The CB burst with static so loud it made me flinch. The lights outside were blinding now. The trucks moved faster, merging seamlessly into one another, their outlines warping in the glare. Then, one by one, they vanished. No brake lights, no sound, no trace. The road ahead was empty. I sat there in the middle of the highway, gasping for breath, until another truck came up behind me and honked. I pulled over to the shoulder, shaking uncontrollably. The driver of the other rig rolled down his window as he passed. You okay, buddy? You're blocking the road. I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. He gave me a strange look and drove on. When I finally got moving again, I checked the clock, 3:12 a.m. somehow, over 2 hours had passed. My odometer showed I'd driven nearly 120 miles, but I had no memory of it. I stopped at a rest area outside Tucson and called dispatch. You guys been trying to reach me? The night operator said no. No calls, no missed check-ins. He sounded confused when I mentioned hearing the other voice. Frank, he said carefully, your CB's been offline since midnight. Our system shows it disconnected. I didn't argue. I just hung up. A few days later, I looked up Westline Transport. The company went bankrupt in 1989 after one of their convoys vanished during a desert storm, 7 trucks, no wrecks, no debris, no bodies. They were last seen on I-10 near mile marker 173. That same week, I checked my truck's dash cam. The video feed from 12:30 to 3 a.m. was pure static, except for one frame, right in the middle of the glitch. It showed 7 rigs, side by side, driving into the darkness. And at the center of the image, the lead truck had a number painted on the side door, 93. My truck number. I deleted the footage and threw the CB out. I haven't driven at night since. But sometimes, when I'm parked in the yard late, my radio still picks up faint static. And if I listen close enough, beneath the hiss, I can hear my father's voice again, calm, steady, the way I remember. Stay in line, son. The end.